Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, AI in 2024, Unveiling Predictions and Seizing Opportunities. My name is Anna, and I am on the Anaconda marketing team, and I will be moderating today's event. While we give everyone a few moments to get settled in, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. We will be recording this webinar, and the link will be provided to you via email tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to post them in the Q&A box on your screen. We try our best to answer as many as we can in the live Q&A session. You can access resource items and helpful links from the resource list on your screen, so I would recommend doing that before the webinar ends today. And to check out our upcoming webinars and events, visit our website at anaconda.com/events. That's it for housekeeping items, so I will pass it on to you, Chris, to get started.
Hello and welcome to AI in 2024, Unveiling Predictions and Seizing Opportunities webinar. Greg and Daniel and I from Anaconda are very excited to talk to you today. Hopefully we'll have a thought-provoking and lively discussion about trends that we're seeing in the market as we move into 2024. So we'll just do some quick introductions. My name is Chris Steiderhar. I'm Director of Product Management for AI and Machine Learning here at Anaconda. I have a background in machine learning implementation and also AI strategy. And I am based in Salt Lake City, Utah, right on the Wasatch Front. So I'm looking forward to a great ski season. Greg?
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Jennings. I'm a Director of Engineering here at Anaconda. I run both our AI initiatives and our unified platform. I have a fairly deep background in AI solutions. I've been building them since about 2012. Very much looking forward to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm Daniel Rodriguez. I have a background in working for startups for a bunch of years, and then I worked for Microsoft. And then I'm finally here working on AI in Anaconda.
All right. Thanks. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this as a fireside chat. Unfortunately, we don't have a fireplace here in person. But we have four really interesting questions that we're going to go through. And let's go ahead and get started. So the first question we have is, what could be next after this year's explosive growth of large language models, or LLMs? Who wants to jump in? I've been doing a lot of talking here so far. Greg?
Yeah, I think so. It's been obviously a very interesting year. It's hard to believe that only just, I think, last week, actually, ChatGPT, the original ChatGPT, turned 1 year old. It's certainly been an explosive growth up until that point. I think what was a little bit unexpected about ChatGPT was just how valuable doing really good instruction fine-tuning and human reinforcement learning would be to the user experience for folks who are not engineers to be able to use these applications. And obviously the open source community has very quickly followed with many, many, many models. So, and only just recently, we have had the Mistral folks, startup out of France, has released a very competitive, what looks to be, at least by initial benchmarks, perhaps perhaps exceeding the capabilities that original GPT 3.5 based ChatGPT. So in very quick, short order, open source community has caught up with language models. But the technology and the hype, I think, has exceeded a little bit of the actual implementation. And I know you have some thoughts on that, Chris.
Thank you for the segue. Yeah, gosh, I can't believe ChatGPT is only a year old. I mean, it seems like just with all the hype and with all the energy and all the discussions in the market, it seems like so much longer. But I really feel like, from my perspective, that 2023 was a year of just a lot of excitement, right? And a lot of exploration. A lot of people, from the CEOs of companies to hobbyists to just really anyone, can go and start interacting now with LLMs and with Gen AI. And so I think that we've had a year of like a lot of hype and a lot of exploration, but not a lot of application to specific purposes, right? Or to like specific business applications. And so I really think that in 2024, there's going to be a lot of focus, and I think it's going to be more in the open source community, though, on like specific business applications. How can I use the power of AI to, I don't know, automate my pricing methods, or how can I use LLMs to, I don't know, help my content creators create better content, things like that. So, yeah, like that's what I'm very excited about. Daniel?
So we saw pretty much everyone in the market just realigning priorities now that we know the potential in practical applications for like AI, because AI for the longest time has been a little bit in the fringes. Just like we knew there were going to be great advancements there, but it was really this year that they started to materialize. And just to mention that they're a great tool, especially for like people making decisions, because now you can make more informed decisions and move faster. But it's also very challenging for everyone. And you will see, like you have been seeing these challenges in the community, and like how outspoken some communities have been, but also in the companies as like everyone learns how to reframe what they can do with AI. So I'm very excited to see moving forward people getting way more creative and using AI for so many new business applications.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out too that the Gen AI space is more than just large language models, and large language models can also be used beyond just using them as themselves to unlock some additional capabilities, like you mentioned, some of people using them to potentially optimize pricing decisions. We've already seen a lot of folks using language models to sort of bridge the gap, the barrier between understanding certain like packages of code to be able to write software. So I would expect that there will be more applications like that, and people will get creative and kind of tying together language models with other technologies in order to create solutions that are more accessible, more approachable for knowledge workers, for people who maybe are not software engineers.
Yeah, and just a quick question for the engineers in the room here. Speaking of open source models, and I know we have a question on it coming up, but do you see the next year, do you see more companies, startups, groups, research organizations really building more purpose-built models? Or do you see the direction going where enterprises are going to take maybe a small set of like the top 10 models and tune them for themselves?
That's a great question. I think it depends to some degree on what the application is. I think the extreme utility of ChatGPT, GPT-4 is in a large degree based on its generality. It can be used for so many different things, but enterprises and organizations generally have specific targeted problems that they want to solve. And I think that they will probably find that they're going to get more cost-effective solutions by doing some combination of fine-tuning, retrieval augmented generation, and using open source models for those specific narrow use cases. Already, we've seen a couple of instances where in very specific narrow use cases, some open source solutions have been able to exceed the capabilities of GPT-4. So I would expect more companies probably to look at that for their specific narrow problems.
Cool.
We see it like at like different scales. Like at the personal scale, you see developers doing like fast iteration and prototyping, and just like way more liquid ability to do cross like role tasks. So because now you can rephrase your problem into an LLM and translate it into something else that maybe you weren't super sure of, and it gives you a better perspective. Then like at this scale of like smaller companies, you see like the democratization of better customer interactions, because now you can do like quickly tie yourself into a provider and provide better customer experiences. And for larger companies, you guys mentioned more automated analytics, but also maybe just like understanding the customer behavior better from like just evaluating what's happening on your data with these more advanced models that are able to understand the human intentions better. So it is, permeating all across the industry at different scales.
Mm. So making models more empathetic, huh?
Right.
I love it. So our next question is, what are strategic considerations for organizations and data professionals to navigate the AI landscape in 2024? So here with this question, we're really thinking about individuals and teams who are working with AI within an organization, right? So, potentially within an enterprise, right? A large manufacturing enterprise, or maybe someone working in pharma, something like that. So, yeah, I don't know, Greg, if you want to kick us off again.
Yeah, I think that for sure, as companies and larger organizations start to field these solutions that in part incorporate language models in their direct applications, then the security model of these applications and a lot of potential legal liability questions, which are still a little bit unanswered, are going to be a lot more on top of mind for those organizations, and that could be especially true in cases where they're already dealing with sensitive information. So think about highly regulated industries like banking or insurance, or in healthcare where you're dealing with private health information of individuals. There will be cases where companies, I think, have a lot of hesitancy there. And the other thing I think that companies will also have to consider is that they still have the challenge of the fact that these models hallucinate quite a bit. In fact, I mean, the argument has been made that everything that the model generates is in a sense, a hallucination. It's just that many times they're right. So but they don't really have a great sense of knowing whether they are correct or not. And errors can come in unexpected places. And for any kind of mission critical application, that's going to be a challenge. And the reproducibility is also going to be a challenge. Already we've seen, for instance, OpenAI has changed the underlying model that your API points to. And if you have trained and tested and evaluated your enterprise solution on a particular endpoint, then you might be a little bit surprised to see that change out from underneath you. And I think that tendency for that to be done will give some companies pause and probably give a little bit more weight to the open source community.
Yeah, it's this whole consideration around security regulations, things like that. Really, to me, especially in the enterprises that I work with and who I've talked to, they want Gen AI, right? They want LLMs, but they want it to be theirs, right? And so with these large, like SaaS-based or web-based proprietary closed source models, right? There's no option to bring that, what we would call on-prem, right? Or to bring that within my, within my VPC or whatnot. And so I think, and two, I think that a strategic consideration is having models that are tuned or that are tailored for what your company is doing, potentially with your data. And I know that I wouldn't want to be sending that data out, right, to another company or something like that. Yeah, I don't know, Daniel, if you have anything else to add too.
Yeah, so if you're a company of any size and you want to use one of these models, it'll to some degree it's no different than hiring someone, or even like if you hire a bunch of people, depending on the scale, that it is really your expertise as a company to be able to determine what's the quality of the outcomes of any of these technologies for your users and for your partners, meaning that you need experts to really review what you're generating. And the more you invest in making new tools with these models, the more you need to oversee and to really invest in the quality of this model. So at the end of the day, it will be much more affordable for companies to hire these experts to help them migrate into these new technologies rather than implementing that on their own, especially if you're going to, deliver that to customers and partners.
Yeah. And one of the other things too along those lines is there's I wouldn't say that there's limited AI talent, right? But because it is a fairly new industry, right? Trying to find, I don't know, kind of like when I was implementing machine learning, and we would want to go out and find, find ML engineers, or find, Kubernetes is a great example. Going out, like, as everyone's starting to move to Kubernetes, which is an infrastructure platform, going out and trying to find like Kubernetes admins. I mean, the market would just price people, and like way out of expectation, right? What we would normally be looking at. And so I think that one of the things people can do, right, is they can go and they can look at partnering, right, with companies that have this expertise and that, I don't know, maybe have a professional services org or something like that and have experience doing this, right? Because going and trying to spin up a team that's doing this from scratch can be really difficult. The only other thing I would add, though, is that since Greg mentioned hallucination, is like, these models are good, right? And they can do some pretty spectacular things, but it's really easy to trip them up too, right? So I don't know if it was Mistral or Llama, one of the open source models the other day. One of my favorite things is to ask them about authors and books. So I'm a big reader. I love sci-fi, right? I love reading, like, oh, is it Ian or Ian Banks? I always mispronounce it. And Hugh Howey is another one of my favorite authors. And so I was asking it to help me find books that are like the Silo series from Hugh Howey. And it started telling me about Hugh Howey and the books that he had read. And it started mentioning Stephen King books, and it started mentioning Ender's Game, which he didn't write, things like that. So that's something we have to keep in mind, is these models are not perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they will both in turn. Even just today, I asked a question, and if you ask something that is beyond the training time horizon for instance, ChatGPT, it will happily give you an answer. Or say, like, ask it for an acronym. I think I asked it for QLoRa, and it will happily give you an answer that is completely made up. For anything that is beyond its time horizon. If you make up an algorithm, or make up an acronym, it will happily give you an answer. So that's got to be reined in, I think, for companies to have confidence that they can actually deploy these things in mission critical situations. And to your point, Daniel, like, the more they do, the more they're going to sort of realize where the rails are, and the fact that they have to have experts reviewing all this stuff. There's one other point that organizations have to consider, and that is the potential brand damage or liability of having a really bad fake answer. That should be concerning. I think that the higher profile the company is, and depending upon what the actual consequences of that answer are, they need to be very cautious, I think, about the situations they put in. Daniel.
So these models are currently terrible, or actually completely incapable of determining intention or like goals, like being objective oriented. This is something that companies are very used to do. Like, whenever we think of like company goals and like metrics that companies are trying to achieve, we have a clear definition of what is the intention and the north. So this is something that we as a company are beginning to really incorporate deeply. But really, everyone in the market should begin to consider is what they want to get from AI, and so that they go towards that direction with clear evaluation and clear metrics.
Yeah,
that's a great segue.
That's a great point. So, speaking of, our next question: how will open source AI and closed source AI compete in the coming year? So, just to level set here, I think the probably the best example of closed source AI would be OpenAI's products, right? So they're
Claude, Gemini,
Yeah. So their GPT model, right? That's closed source. They don't show you how they build it. There are a lot of theories out there around.
Rumors.
Yeah, like because when I first saw it, I was like, this looks like it's a bunch of models running at once. And so there's a lot of rumors around there.
Yep.
Claude, that's Anthropic's, right?
Yep.
Gemini and Bard, that's Google. So those are examples of closed source models. Open source LLMs and Gen AI, Mistral, Llama, Meta. Stable Diffusion, is Stable Diffusion closed source or open source?
Stable Diffusion is open source.
Okay.
Image model. Yeah. Gen AI image.
So yeah, those are some examples. I don't know, Daniel, we haven't started with you yet. What are your thoughts on how they're going to compete?
So for smaller companies, right? I'm expecting next year to see simpler models, more efficient models, maybe deployed on devices. So you can think in terms of IoT. You can think in terms of like small service providers, but really for general purpose solutions, I can expect these private models to offer more and more powerful solutions for everyone. Whereas for more expert systems and highly critical systems, especially like if you have a control environment where you need to really safeguard your data, and maybe the more data you have, the better. I'm expecting open source to shine as well as partnerships, but if you can train your model based on your own data, you can actually measure and quantify and narrow down the exact outcomes you want to get. So I'm excited for that side of the business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you mentioned about data, like getting the data right is extremely important in these models. In fact, there's some argument, I guess, or some recent research that's been done that says, regardless of sort of what training approach you take, it kind of all boils down to the data that you have, and whatever data that you have is going to set kind of an upper bound of capability on the model. So companies that have the ability to curate unusual, rare data sources, and then they have the ability to access folks either internally or experts that they can bring on that can help them do fine-tuning of the right pre-trained models will be, I think, at a big advantage. And like you said, Daniel, the capability to be able to run these things on devices that are closer to the edge, on more consumer hardware devices, the ability to have models that are extremely capable, that don't require like huge data center to run, will open up way more applications for them within the industries.
Yeah. I have, I guess, I don't know if it's a unique take, but a fairly interesting take on this. So when I look at the closed source, and I'll, really focus on OpenAI here, like their stated mission, I think it's been the mission since, back when they were founded a number of years ago, is to develop AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. And there are, various definitions about this, but the one that I like to think of is this is an AI that can do things better than a human, right? Maybe not better than all humans, but better than I think you said a median human or something like that. So
median human is a term I've heard recently from some merger stats.
and so that pursuit, well, to me, that's very intriguing. And then of course we can do all the jokes about Skynet and Terminator, and like, does AGI mean it's self-aware? Will it start doing things and going out and editing itself or whatnot? Who knows at this point? But to me, there's that, it's almost an academic pursuit, right? Going and being like, okay, we want to develop something that is smarter than a human, that is better than a human at doing things. Well, to anyone who's used, ChatGPT or the other LLMs, to me, they're really fun to play with. But to get them in, like to get models in that can help me code and things like that, that's where the real business value or the real market value comes from. So I think that the big closed source AIs, the closer say AI companies are really going after AGI, where I really think the open source ones are going to pop up that have more specific applications, right? This is going to help me code. This is going to help me write.
Yeah.
This is going to help me do, I don't know, do like sentiment analysis or something like that. So that's what I think about that.
I mean, of course, the recent turmoil in OpenAI was exactly around this point, which was what is our real mission? And I think the fact that they sort of have become, they took a lot of investment and they've become a very commercial offering. Some people felt that they drifted from that mission of creating a artificial general intelligence. I think, for me, it depends really on what type of task you need. The models that we have right now are trained basically in a way to self-supervised learning to generate a probability distribution over a bunch of tokens, and like think about it as word and word fragments. And in that role, they do a tremendously good job, arguably better than any human. But to Daniel's point earlier, they don't really have any sense of agency, any sense of underlying purpose sitting behind it. And what will be interesting is that a lot of the open source world is really trying to drive models in that direction, toward getting them to behave more as agents. I've seen a lot of the people using open source solutions in combination with even proprietary LLM endpoints to do this with things like LangChain. So it'd be interesting to see if we start to adapt the training regime of models to sort of fit more around what people's intended use of them is.
Yeah.
Well, just one more note there, sorry.
Sure.
Look, the more we have general solution LLMs and the more we like integrate them everywhere, the more it will be a problem for companies and anything trying to make something reliable to really safeguard that. So this is a huge advantage of open source models where you can really, especially in the incoming years, you will be able to narrow down on the security vulnerabilities and on the data that's used to train them for regulation, but also to safeguard your systems. Because right now, as models stand today, they all have huge vulnerabilities on like breaking out of the boundaries you set them to work with. So, I don't know if Greg has any comment around that. So like security and
segue to our next question.
Yeah.
All right.
So our last question here is what do you think are the most likely outcomes of the race to build marketable, high performing AI systems? And I guess here we can cue the Skynet.
Yeah, well, I think Daniel's point is really on the money for this in a lot of ways. In terms of the near term things, I think we'll see is that companies actually are going to want to narrow the scope of LLMs, because narrowing the scope of the LLMs will create more reliable experience, and the reliability and dependency of those solutions, depending on the application that they put them in, is going to be extremely important. It's also worth noting that we're still very, very, very early stages for these technologies. The field is evolving extremely rapidly. I think that Hugging Face has a open source model hub, and I think they're on pace, averaging close to maybe 1,000 models per day. People are adding to Hugging Face, and a lot of them are sort of forks of other models or maybe checkpoints. But still, it's an incredible pace, and it's the amount of energy going into this space is huge. So the farther out you go, the more difficult it becomes to predict exactly what these things will be. But I think like getting these models to actually behave in a consistent fashion and have more real world grounding. There's a number of emerging approaches around that, and some problem areas may be better than others. But that seems to me like one of the first places in 2024 companies are really going to try to focus.
Yeah. It's the word that I key on in this question is marketable systems, right? So I think that there's been a lot of work done in systems that don't necessarily have a clear I don't know I don't really know any other way to say it other than a clear market value, right? Or like a clear business application,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that 2024 is really going to bring as startups pop up around AI and LLMs and whatnot, there's really going to be a focus on, okay, this is cool, but what value can you drive? Right? Like, okay, we want to give you $100 million to go and fund this, but what's our plan for actually monetizing this or actually, turning it into something that people are going to want to pay for or that organizations are going to want to buy and leverage. So and the other thing too, I think in terms of when I look at the term high performing, I think of I don't know why I was thinking of this, but there's a show that's called Devs. I think it came out on Hulu a few years ago, and it was about this team of engineers that was developing a very sophisticated application that actually used energetic, I think it's entropy is the name for it, but to that they could walk back and forth like along a timeline, and they could actually predict the future, and they could go back and they could like witness historical events because they had this incredibly powerful, I think it was supposed to be a quantum computer because it looked like a chandelier.
It sounds pretty far-fetched.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
But like having that computing power that is like exponentially even beyond GPUs or like warehouses full of GPUs, that's what I think is really going to unlock a lot of marketable high performance AI, because we're going to have the computing power now, not only to train these models, but actually to do very sophisticated inference and to do very sophisticated calculations on the fly.
Yeah.
So,
and certainly there's a ton of work being put into hardware. I do think that before we're likely to see some of those really massive advances, the hardware architecture and the supply chain of hardware is very limited right now and challenging. So it's likely to be quite a lot of years before we see that kind of advancement. But we already have a lot of very capable LLMs, but they're not really running a lot on edge devices. And I think they're getting smaller, they're getting better, they're getting faster. And at the same time, companies will start to figure out places to employ those more readily. And it's worth noting as well, like I said, that Gen AI is a lot more than just LLMs. They are, voice-based user experience, image generation, video generation, text to speech. All of these technologies will be strung together, and I think we'll have a lot of hybrid systems. And the key word there I would pull out of systems is like much more. You'll start to see that the systems that incorporate multiple different Gen AI technologies will start to become a lot more differentiated because people will get creative and put them together in unique ways that we probably can't really think about right now.
Yeah. So we're almost at time, Daniel. Do you want to take us home?
Look, you'll see AI everywhere because not only more efficient, but also it will have way more context. It will work with way more technologies, even everyday systems. So in my mind, what I have is like the liquefaction of expertise and of knowledge. And really, the only way to prepare for that is to increase exposure of persons and companies to AI, and see how that reframes your everyday process. I think that not only the technology built next year, but also how companies react to it will be determinant for all of the great things will be possible because of it.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thanks for that. All right. Well, we're at time. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this little fireside chat we had. We would love to take some questions and, of course, continue the conversation. You can see our emails here. If you just Google us, I'm sure you can find us on LinkedIn or whatever, and you can, reach out to us. We would love to continue this, this conversation as we continue to explore the applications in the world of AI.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.